Coming up on today's swim episode.
See the difference, and as a result, it winds up being one-dimensional, sounding less wide. Even though you may have something pan hard left, hard right, if you're doing the same exact thing on both sides, that creates that flat sound. Going back to my example of the guitar where you're doing...
This is Swim, Success with Music.
Yo, what's good, music fam? This is Walt, and you are listening to Swim. That stands for Success with Music. This is a podcast for singers, songwriters, beat makers, music students. We are here and we're talking about the music life and specifically tips and insight that will help you get better at the creation or the creative process, get better with marketing, get better with understanding musical concepts. And we're here to help you get better at your overall sound. Yo, I appreciate you listening to the episode as usual. If you happen to be new to the podcast, we've seen an uptick in listeners as of late, so I do appreciate it. And for those of you who are new, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Go ahead and do it now. And when new episodes drop, you'll be the first to hear them. We are on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. So go ahead, subscribe to it right now, and you can actually subscribe from our website, which is successwithmusic.com, successwithmusic.com. And if you go to the bottom of the screen, there should be some buttons that pop up where you can subscribe. You can also listen to all the past episodes if you just kind of cruise through the menu on our homepage. So yeah, go ahead and do that right now so you can keep up with us. And we'll keep the music knowledge flowing. Yo, so I wanted to get back into some production related tips today and some editing related tips. And specifically, I want to deal with the concept of wideness in your track, how big your sound is, how broad, or I guess in simpler terms, how much stereo you have going on in your track. I'm not going to get into like the surround sound world. That's just a completely different animal, in my opinion, and you're getting more into television and cinematic stuff. I'm just talking about music for the average consumer. If you're listening to a set of headphones, or if you're in your car, or if you're creating music just, again, for the average listener, I want to talk about how to widen your overall sound. Now, we're not going to get into volume. We're not going to get into the actual sound energy, because we kind of tackled that way back on episodes 47 through 49. So if you're looking to make your track louder, go ahead and check those episodes out. But again, today we are dealing with how wide it is. So yeah, man, let's do it. So today I want to offer seven tips on how to widen your track to make it big, immersive, large, whatever kind of adjective you want to throw in there. So these tips will come kind of fast. Fair warning, they will require that you have to go maybe do some additional research. Not all of them, but some of them will require for you to do a little digging, because each of your setups may be different, your digital audio workstation. So the tools or the plugins or the things that you may need to accomplish what I'm talking about may differ. But again, I'm going to send you in the right direction to achieve a bigger sound. But as we do get into it, know that today's episode is brought to you by our Swim Master Melody course. You can check that out at our main page. It's the Swim Master Melody course. This is an online course that will help you get better at creating melodies, melody structure, how to create a captivating song, create something that will cause people to remember your music like forever. And that's really the goal if you're trying to create songs that you're putting out there for consumption, for listening online and streaming and things like that. So yeah, check it out at our main page. Again, it's the Swim Master Melody course. It's right there at the top of our page on successwithmusic.com. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our 7 tips. All right, so my first tip, I will go through it by way of a story. So A few weeks back, I was working on my own song and doing some editing and things like that. And before I get into that, fair warning, what I'm talking about today, all the widening tips, it's really kind of at the final stages of your recording process. So in the mixing stage, in the mastering stage. So just fair warning. So if you're just starting your song, I mean, I guess some of this stuff can be applied, but I'm really looking at once you kind of have all of your pieces in place, all your instruments, all your vocals, that type of thing. So let me get back to my story, right? So a few weeks ago, I'm towards the end of creating my song, and as usual, I will just go ahead and throw in a reference track just to kind of see where do I compare to some of the bigs out there, some of the major recording studios, what kind of sound they're putting out, and let me compare my track to those commercially released tracks. So that's what I mean by reference track. I reference something a bit bigger and better in terms of input than what I have to offer. Anyhow, I go ahead and drag in this commercially released track, and then there's my track, and I do the old A-B scenario. I play the track from this nationally known artist. I play my track, and of course, get discouraged like ultra fast. So I realized, among a number of things, that their sound was really, really wide and broad and deep. My track felt flat, boring, and thin. And then there's a number of reasons for that. We're not going to get into that today. We're just going to deal with the wideness that I heard in this commercially released track. So my first tip is simply this. If you are looking to achieve a wider sound, if I were you, go out and get a reference track. Find a song in the same genre that you produce or write in and put it out there. Just put it up into your digital audio workstation and play your song and play that song. And check out what's happening there. If you discover, like I did, that your song seems to be very narrow, very flat, kind of one-dimensional, you have some work to do, most likely. And so my first tip, again, is get yourself a reference track so you know exactly what the bar is with respect to commercially released music or what's being put out there in terms of sound, a commercial sound. All right, so get that reference track. That's tip number one. Tip number two, this is an oldie, but an absolute favorite of mine. When you're trying to achieve a wider sound, I am an absolute raving fan of LCR panning. LCR panning, letters LCR, standing for left, center, and right. This concept, or this methodology, if you will, it's all about hard panning, meaning you'll pan some of your instruments hard left, you'll put some things in mono dead center, and you'll put other things far right. Now, when I used to produce, I don't know, a few years back, I love the kind of the gray areas, 30% over to the left, 70% over to the right, maybe 85% and 15%. I think it made me feel like I was doing something special, but in reality, I think I was just using my indicators on my screen just to make me feel like I'm spreading the sound throughout between the left and the right side of the audio spectrum. I don't think I was doing a lot in terms of creating a broad sound. So my point is, I like to deal in extremes when achieving a wide sound. So for instance, if you are going to put in, let's say, a couple of guitars, I would pan one guitar, let's say it's rhythm, far left. And then let's say you have a secondary rhythm guitar, maybe some plucking or some lead, moves or whatever. I'll put that far right. So I'll put one far left, one far right. Now, kind of a bonus tip within the tip here, and this is kind of with guitars, but this can actually be applicable to some other things. I was talking to what I perceive as one of the best guitarists I've met, period, in my entire life. And I've been around for a while. I'm quite older than some of you guys out there. This guy is like a virtuoso, but he taught me something new. As a guitar player, what he does is when he's doing LCR panning, he will play a set of rhythm chords and he'll record them and put them hard left. He will record the same chords, like 1, 4, 5, or whatever the chord progression is, he'll record the same progression on the right side, far right. The thing is, though, he will do an inversion of the chord on the opposite side of the speaker. So in other words, you have, let's say, the first inversion on the left side of the speaker, let's say it's an A chord, and then you do the second inversion of A, same chord, on the far right. And when you play them together, it just gives you a fuller and wider sound. Both guitars are playing the chord A, but they're, again, panned hard left, hard right, but together they give you this wide, broad sound, all with one chord. You can apply this to vocals, meaning you can, kind of flip your harmonies around. You can apply this to, let's say, synth chords or synth intervals. So play around with this idea, and I'm telling you, you will achieve a wide sound. All right, let me keep going because I think I went too far on detail in that one. The next thing is, and this is a pretty obvious one, you can go ahead and find yourself, a stereo widening plugin or stereo image plugin. So on your DAW, you probably should have something called like stereo imaging or imager, or sometimes these names may vary depending on what kind of plugin you have, but that may be a way to kind of widen the sound. I think these are okay, but if you're not careful, you can wind up with a very artificial sound. And also, depending on the original sound that you're running through your plugin, some of the qualities within that sound may kind of interrupt or counteract the actual plugin's intent. So play around with it and see if you get the sound that you're looking for. Having said that, though, I would recommend using the stereo widening plugin on individual instruments. I know that I mentioned that we're talking about kind of the sum of everything, like at the mastering stage here. But when I'm using widening plugins, I'll save it for, a synth part, or maybe, some guitar or horns or a bell or what have you. For plugins, for whatever reason, I just don't feel good about putting a widener on my master bus. I feel like it's rarely worked out for me. Maybe my plugins suck. So the tip is, if you want to widen your mix, try to apply a stereo plugin to individual key instruments, maybe like a pad or a warm synth that you want to kind of envelop all the other instruments or kind of back them up. That may make sense. All right, let's go on to our next tip. I highly recommend that you go do some research on this. And this is called mid-side processing. Mid-side processing. Go ahead and Google it. My DAW, in order to get this done with my DAW, it's pretty complicated, but I set it up as a template. So when I'm at the mastering stage, I have all of my tracks set up to where this process can be done without me trying to figure out how to do this each and every single time. But let me go and just define what we're talking about here. Mid-side processing is just a way to make adjustments to the spacing of the instruments when you're at the final mastering stage. Now, the mid in this name, mid-side processing, it stands for all of these sounds that share the middle of your set of speakers. So in other words, everything that is mono. And then all of the sounds that are on the sides, that's in a separate channel. So in effect, mid-side processing will allow for you to separate all of your mono sounds collectively and all of your side sounds collectively. And so what you can do is, once you are at the point of using this technique, you can move your mono sounds up or down by way of one fader. You can move all of your side stereo sounds up by one fader. So if you want to make your sound overall a bit wider, you'll drag your fader up a little bit. Or if it's too wide or it's becoming too muddy, you can bring that mid up just a bit. So again, this is a phenomenal technique. So go ahead and check that out. Google it. Find out how to apply it in your digital audio workstation. Mid-side processing. All right. So next thing here, let's talk about I'm trying to figure out how I can say this best here. I would say the mixture of sound treatment for your individual tracks. So I'm going to, again, kind of contradict myself just a bit here. So I mentioned, being at the mastering